And welcome everybody. We'll get started here in just a moment. For those of you joining us for the first time, enjoy a music video. One based on databases, which is kind of a first. For those of you who've been with us before, I hope you like this song because I play it every time. But we'll get started here in just a minute. And hello everybody. I don't know about you, but I enjoy starting our workshops with a nice EDM track. I just actually love that song. I play it myself when we're not doing these. But anyway, I am David Jones-Gilardi. I am joined today by David Chung. Hello, David.
Hey David, how's it going?
That's
probably number one in your playlist, right?
It is kind of number one. I do play that song a lot. So if we could just get a thumbs up. Can I get thumbs up in the YouTube and the Discord chats if you can hear us and the sound is okay? We just want to... Oh, the name of the song, Above the Clouds. As a matter of fact, if you give me just a moment, once we get started, I can go ahead and drop you a link to the actual music. You can download all this music. We created a bunch of music videos last year during our Accelerate conference, and that was one of them. Awesome, great. It sounds like it is coming through just fine. Wonderful. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and take a look at some material. So welcome to this Cassandra certification workshop. If you don't know it already, in this workshop, David and I are going to bring you through not only what to expect, we're going to kind of start off and explain all the things you need to do to get it set up for your certification. But then also we're going to go through a set of 20 practice questions. These questions look and feel every bit. We purposely took a sampling from the real exam of the types of questions you should expect, right? To really kind of set the expectations so you know kind of what to dig into. So with that, let me go ahead and first thing, we will drop a link so you can follow along. Let's do that real quick. So this link is going to be to the GitHub repository itself. And let me pop that over. Excellent. Thank you all for letting us know that it sounds and looks good. We always like to do a check because we have lots of little moving parts and buttons to put all this together. Okay, so that link I just dropped is the GitHub repository. The GitHub repository that I'm dropping now is going to essentially give you the same information that we're going to talk about, right? Really, though, this is more of a self-service way of doing things. So later on, after today or whatever, if you're like, hey, he talked about, this link or this site or where do I get this? You can go to this GitHub repository. It's going to have all the information in there. The real thing I want to point out with regard to the information is this practice or these practice questions here. So if you click on practice questions, you can actually follow along with all of them. Now, we're going to present all the questions for you online in the stream. However, if, let's say, for some reason, your lower bandwidth or the clarity isn't great on your YouTube feed or something, we have two options for you. One, you can always go to our secondary Twitch feed. We do have like a backup Twitch feed that we use. Let me go ahead and give that to everybody right now. And here you go. So this is for Twitch. There's that. And let me drop this down here as well. Okay, so our DataStax Dev channel, we always kind of use as like a backup feed. But then also, you can just follow along in the GitHub repository if you'd like, right? So as we go through the questions, I'll be calling out the number. I'll say, okay, this is question number 1. I'll explain it, and then you can actually just go to the questions here. The one thing I do ask you not to do is you'll notice here it says click to view the correct answer. I'll ask you not to do that while we're actually taking the questions. I want you to struggle a little bit with things. But just know if you go through this self-service on your own, then all of the answers will be here for you. So you kind of like noodle on what the answer might be. If then you want to check yourself, then you can go ahead and click the drop-down box there to get the correct answer. Okay, let me move on. All right, so next thing is going to be the Menti. Now, for some reason, I don't have my Menti slide. So I'm just going to pop over to the Menti, and let's go ahead and, if you would, just go to menti.com. The code is right there on your screen, 6280242. I'll drop it. Or you can just scan the QR code with your phone. Prashant, over in Discord, you're asking what Cassandra version these exams are based off of. This is 3, right? This is for Cassandra 3. We do, in fact, have... Thank you, Jack. I saw you drop that Menti code. We do have new exams coming for Cassandra 4. David, aren't you working on those? The Cassandra 4 ones?
Right now, actually, what we've announced is we are working on Cassandra operations in Kubernetes.
Oh, that's right. That's right. There's a new set of certs coming out.
But afterwards, the next thing tentatively on our certification calendar will be updating the exams for Cassandra 4.
Okay. So, Prashant, to answer your question, these current exams are for Cassandra 3. Cassandra 4 will eventually happen. Now, the next follow-up question that we always get is, oh, well, when the Cassandra 4 stuff drops, will that invalidate, like if I pass the exam and I get the certification, will it invalidate it or anything? No, your Cassandra 3 certification will be good indefinitely, right, forever. Matter of fact, I technically still have my Oracle 8 certification. So for those familiar with Oracle, if that says anything, then you'll totally understand. All right, so I already see a lot of you getting thumbs up and hearts. That's wonderful. So we want to get you in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, ask you some questions just to get you know you a little bit better here in the Menti. Then you want to leave Menti open, because later on, when we go to do the practice questions, we're going to use Menti for that. Okay, so first one here. How much experience do you have with Apache Cassandra? Oh, wow. Okay, so we have a good spread here today. We've got a lot of folks that have never used it before or less than 1 year. I see some veterans have joined us today. Hello, veterans. So for those who have never used it before, or if there are questions that come up during the practice exam, you're just like, I have no idea. That's totally okay. That's what we're here for, right? Matter of fact, we will, as part of this, we're going to send you to a set of resources that you can use to essentially get you all of the information you would need to pass your exam, right? So if you've never used it before and you're brand new, don't worry. By the way, if you have questions, that's part of what we're here for, right? So especially, even for our veterans, if you've got something, maybe something we're saying isn't clear, or you're not clear about a certain concept, ask your questions. Don't be shy. We may not get to everything. We're going to try, right? But definitely ask your questions, and we will also have more resources for you as that goes as well, so you can ask follow-ups. Okay, thank you very much. All right, next question here. Have you been to one of our workshops before? Oh, there's my coffee. Hey, Lokesh. How you doing? Oh, that's great. Prosen over in YouTube says, do we need a booster certification once we have Cassandra 4? That's kind of awesome. I kind of like that. We should gamify the whole thing. That's great. Oh, wow. So a lot of you have been with us before. Well, hello to the 43 folks that have been with us before, and to the 21 who have not. Welcome, welcome. Oh, I see 45. Wow. I should ask a follow-up question. Have you been to this workshop before? Because I'd actually be really curious if folks have been to this workshop or now coming back to this workshop. But anyway, okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, lots of frequent flyers today.
Yeah, right. All right, so how did you hear about this workshop? I just realized, for those who've been to these before, I need to put an option, I've been to this before. For how did you hear about it? Well, look, it's not that it's a contents, but it looks like Eventbrite is usually a top one there. Oh, wow. For the 6 of you so far who searched for it, I'm really curious. If you wouldn't mind dropping something in the comments or whatever, when you searched for it, were you explicitly looking for Cassandra certification? Did you just come across it because you saw something with Cassandra and saw, oh, I can get a certification? I'm really curious when you searched for it, what your intent was. Oh, Fame, we're going to tell you where you go to sign up for the exam, all that stuff. That's part of what we're going to do today. Okay, and then what motivates you to get certified? Okay. Oh, looks like, okay, so as folks are answering here, back to my previous question, it looks like some folks like Vignesh there in YouTube, were in particular looking for Cassandra certification. That's excellent. I'm glad to see that came up. Oh, okay. Ashan was working with the Udacity D program. Nice.
And I'm glad to see Cassandra is cool is trending. It's the second
yeah.
second choice here.
Cassandra is cool. I mean, it's so funny. Before I came on doing this kind of work, now it's, oh God, I'm going to my 5th year this year. Woo. But this work specifically with Cassandra, I've always been in the databases and coding. That's been my whole career, and I actually love database tech. I think it's fun. And when I first came on to DataStax, and someone explained to me like a database driver company for this thing called Apache Cassandra, I never thought I would be so excited to talk about drivers and a database. But Cassandra is honestly seriously cool. You can do some really neat stuff with it. Oh, I see. Okay, and I see Kazurk over in Discord. I was searching for the prep course after contacting the Academy help page, and the help personnel told me you offered a free prep course. Cool. Excellent. Okay, very, very cool. Thank you, everybody, for answering the questions. And with that, okay, so keep Menti open, because we're going to come back to it, and that's where we're going to do all of our practice questions. Okay, so as the agenda, right, and I see some of you are already asking questions along these lines. Where do I get the exam? How do I sign up, right? All that kind of deal. That's the first thing we're going to tackle here, right, is which certification and what resources. Then we're going to go over the steps that you need to take. It's not that hard. We've got it all documented for you. And then we're going to get into the practice questions. So with that, first thing, which certification should I get? I should probably make us smaller. Let's see. Are we smaller yet, Dave? Yes, we are. Good. We should make us smaller.
Honey, I Shrunk the Presenters.
Yes, we shrunk the presenters. If you know that movie with Rick Moranis from back, what was that, the 80s already? No, 90s? Then let us know if you know what movie we're talking about. All right, so what certification should I get? So there are 2 certifications currently for the Cassandra certification. There's either the administrator certification or the developer certification. Now, you could do both if you felt so inclined, right? There's nothing limiting you. They're not mutually exclusive or anything like that. Generally speaking, though, if you want to know, well, which one fits me? If you are planning to, say, install, configure, manage, or operate a Cassandra database, the administrator certification is probably for you. If, however, you are a developer and you are, maybe like a data architect or, someone who is looking to use data from Cassandra and use Cassandra, the developer certification is probably more for you. So like I said, you can totally do both, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about here a little bit later, you get options to take both those exams, no problem. But again, if you are looking to actually run a Cassandra database and operate it, administrator. If you're looking to use it with code, developer is most likely the one you're looking for. Okay, so what resources do you have? You actually have a ton of resources for this. First place, and I'll go ahead and pull this up real quick, is this datastax.com/dev/certifications. Matter of fact, if you go to the GitHub repository that I dropped earlier in the very beginning, you'll find that there is, let me go back one more time. Here we go. You'll find that there is a link that brings you to where you need to go, but I will drop it for you anyway. So this page, which certification is best for students, Nikhil? I would say the developer one probably is. Only because I'm making an assumption that by students, it depends what you're a student of. If you're like if you're a coding student, right? If you're learning programming languages, you probably want to learn how to interface with a database and how to do things like that. I think the developer certification is probably for you. But if you're a student and you're looking to get into more IT and ops and run the databases, then the admin one would be. So it really just depends. But this link that I just dropped here, this is the dev/certifications. This is like a one-stop shop. This will give you all the information that you need. So you can totally start here. And again, that is in that GitHub repo. Then on the bottom left-hand corner, that GitHub link is the one I dropped earlier, the Workshop Cassandra certification. It's the one we're working out of right now. And then on the right-hand side, in the very bottom right-hand corner, that training, academy.datastax.com. Now I'm going to show you kind of like a little demo of how that works. By the way, Academy is a completely free resource, right? All of our training is free. I want to be very clear about that. Anything we're going to send you to is free. We don't have paywalls or whatever. But in Academy, you actually have the full course workup for both the admin path and the developer path. And that is also the place that you kick off taking your exam. So for those of you who are curious, how do I get to the exam? It is right through Academy, and I'm going to show you that all today. Okay, and then just two other places. On the left-hand side, you see where it says forum. Community.datastacks.com is like Stack Overflow for Cassandra, right? So, once we stop our session today, and we've kind of caught up with whatever questions we can on YouTube and Discord and such. Well, once I stop the YouTube stream, the YouTube chat pretty much stops, right? So if you have follow-up, or if you are working on your own Cassandra cluster, or you're going through exercises and you need help, community is a really good place to go, right? There are folks that are not just us. There are folks from the Cassandra community. There are folks around the world who answer the questions that are up there. And then on the right-hand side for the Discord chat, if you're in Discord now, well, guess what? You're already there. And I see you, Humblebee. What is the validity period of developer certification? And Jack just nailed it. Thank you. They're valid for 3 months. We'll talk about that in a moment. But once we give you the keys to getting your voucher, they'll be valid for 3 months.
Actually, David, I don't think that's what Humblebee was asking. I think Humblebee's asking how long the certification is good for.
And that's indefinite. Yeah.
The current certifications are for Cassandra 3.
Yes.
And when you pass it, you'll be certified forever on the current version, Cassandra 3. But we do have plans in the future to update the certification for newer releases of Cassandra.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification there. On the right-hand side, you see the Discord chat. Now, Discord is where we continue. We have a 9,000 strong Cassandra community in our Fellowship of the Cassandra Rings server. So that link will bring you to sign up for that. Again, that's free. The cool thing about the Discord is, well after the session has ended, well after the YouTube chat has ended, if you want to come and ask questions and chat with us or whatever, we're here, right? So Discord is a really good place to go to ensure that you can continue the conversation, if you will. By the way, I just saw a comment from Carl over in YouTube that said, the old days you could see the cert on your site. Now there is no place to view them. I don't know, David, do you have a thought on that? Because I know I can still...
Actually, Jack's on that.
Is he? Yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay. So it looks like Jack can get you hooked up. Because I was like, I know I have my cert and I can still view it, so I was curious about that one. Alrighty. All right, so let's go ahead into the steps now for certification. So the first one, we already talked about that link, going to /dev certifications at datastacks.com, right? That's really the one-stop shop that's going to give you all the information and kind of dig a little bit more into some of the information we're presenting here today. The biggest thing, though, I want to point out, and I'm going to show this to you in a moment, is the exam rules and process section, right? These exams are proctored. Somebody will be watching you for the full duration of your exam. Not only that, there are rules that you need to abide by. Like one, you can't get up to go to the bathroom, right? You cannot have a secondary monitor. You can't, there's all sorts of things, and it's all completely listed out in the exam rules and process section. So it's really behooves you to go take a look at that, make sure you've got everything set up before you start your exam, because you don't want to get to it, not realize you have to do all these things, and now you got to scramble to do it. Now, on the second part of this, though, the cool thing, you can take these exams anytime, 24/7. You do not have to schedule them. You can literally just say, I'm ready to go, press the button, boom, a proctor will show up, and you can take your exam live. As we already talked about, there's two learning paths, right? There's the admin learning path and the developer learning path. These are in Academy. These learning paths will show you all of the coursework you need for each one of these to give you all the information you need to pass the exam. So if you were to take all of the coursework that is in the admin but learning path, you should have all of the knowledge you need to get through the exam. It's the same thing with the developer learning path. So choose one. If you're going to do both, obviously do both. And I will show you this here in a moment. If you haven't done so already, you're going to want to go and sign up at DataStax Academy. Again, that's the vehicle that you're going to use to actually take the exam, and it's all free, so it's just a sign up. And matter of fact, separate from what we're doing here today, there is a ton of other free content in there if you want to learn about other things. So it's worth taking a look. Okay, so once you have chosen learning path and you've completed the course material in a learning path, in one of those learning paths, here's something cool. Then you can use that to get your free exam voucher. Now, this is kind of key, right? So let's say that you've just completed the developer learning path and you've completed all the course materials, and in Academy, it'll track your progress, right? You'll see that you've been checked off and everything. Once you do that, you can email academy@datastacks.com using the same email you sign up to Academy with. Let them know that you've completed one of the learning paths, and you'll get a voucher for free. That voucher is good for 2 attempts, 2 exam attempts. So whether that means, and it can be in any combination. So whether that means you take a single attempt, you pass, and then you go, well, you know something? I'm going to go ahead and do the other one, right? So I started with dev, and now I'm going to go for the admin. You can totally do that. Or if for some reason you don't pass the first time, you have a second free attempt with 1 voucher. So when you get your voucher, 1 voucher will give you 2 attempts. Now, there's another way you can get a voucher. If you go to this, and I'll go ahead and drop this link for all of you, unless Jack beats me to it. Jack tends to beat me to things sometimes. Here, let me pull this up real quick. All right, I'm going to drop this link for you. Let me drop this one. Okay, so this CRUD Python and Code one as another way to get a voucher, okay? So what you do is, if you follow the instructions that are in this workshop, this is another one of our self-service workshops, and you create an Astra database there. And again, if you use the same email that you registered to Eventbrite with, then that is another way that you can get a voucher, right? Now, honestly, for the purposes of what we're doing today, I really, really suggest go to Academy. You're going to want to take, unless you're a veteran, unless you're extremely familiar with, Cassandra and how it operates and runs and everything, you're going to want to go through the course material in Academy to ensure that you have all of the knowledge that you could possibly need to pass those exams. So I really suggest that. We're just offering another option for you, just in case that fits you better. Okay, and then here we go. And then last thing is to go ahead and take your exam. Once you're ready, you've got your voucher and you're ready to go, then you go take your exam. And like I said, it's 24/7. You don't have to schedule it. It's proctored, and we're going to go through that here right now.
Hey, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Yeah, please.
You asked about Astra.
Oh, yeah.
Astra is our Cassandra in the cloud offering. It's a hosted Cassandra database. And what's really cool about it for people just starting out is there is a free tier. So you can log in. There's no create an account, no credit card required. And it's the quickest way to fire up and play with Cassandra.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of the exam questions, when we came up with the questions and wanted to test them out, everyone working in the exam had Cassandra on their machine. Most of us ran it in Astra because it was simpler.
Yeah, no, so for those who are not, thank you for explaining that, Dave. Even though in this particular workshop, we don't really focus on Astra too much, you will find that the vast majority of our self-service workshops, we use Astra because I can spin up a fully featured Cassandra database in a couple minutes and go, right? And they have really great APIs. For those of you who are, maybe say more full stack front end folks, you're not tied to a particular language, at least for backend, to database interface or whatever. Astra does have a REST API, GraphQL API, and a document API, which we explore in a lot of our other workshops, which means I don't actually need a driver, right? I can actually go through one of those APIs and talk directly to my Cassandra database. But yeah, so if you are more interested in Astra, by all means, I'll drop you some links and stuff as we get going, and we can talk more about that. Okay. All right, so what I want to do is bring you all through just a little bit of a kind of a demo, right, of what to expect. Now, one of the links I mentioned, and this is all in the materials, is notice here I'm at academy.datastacks.com. I've logged in as myself, and as we mentioned, we have both the admin and the developer learning paths. So I'm just going to pick the developer path, and what it's going to do, it's going to list out all of the materials that you need to complete to ensure that you have the knowledge you need for the exam. So when we say, by the way, that you need to complete the learning path, this is what we're talking about. Now, each one of these is a course on its own, right? So if I go ahead and I click on DS201, you'll see that there's all of this coursework in here. There are sets of videos. There are quizzes for you to take. Those are very important that you feel comfortable with the quizzes. I also want to point out over here in resources, you'll see that there are these exercises and lab work. Now, if you want to really get your hands dirty and really solidify the knowledge you gain from the courses, we really suggest to go ahead and take a look at the exercises. However, You do not have to take them in order to get the knowledge you need to pass the exam, right? You could do nothing but the videos and the quizzes and have what you need if you wanted. However, if you really want to get in and really want to solidify that knowledge, we do suggest you take a look at all of the exercises. And as David just mentioned there, you can do the vast majority of those up on Astra. I would say, though, that if you're following the exercise guide directly, that you're going to have to, the exercise guide is meant specifically to work with a local VM, right? So the instructions are set up that way. Using Astra is not that hard, so it's usually more if you're doing things like CQL, you can totally do those all up on Astra. If you're doing things where, in some of the exercises, you may be changing the number of nodes, changing replication factor, that's not something you're going to do in Astra. But if you're doing CQL, yeah, you can do them all up there. Okay, so let me go back a little bit. Okay, so you'll go through one of the learning paths. Once you finish one of these, then it's time to go ahead and email academy@datastacks.com and let them know you finished it to get your voucher. Now, once you've completed this and you're ready, you're like, okay, I've done my learning path. I feel good with the content. I've gone through the practice quizzes. I'm good. You want to do your certification. What do? Notice that there is this DataStax certification course, right? So you go in there, click on that. Now, this is where you're going to be introduced to a platform called Metal. Metal is the test-taking platform. Now, I've already logged in and everything. So what'll happen is you'll just sign up again. Metal's free. So it's just, you just kind of register for your account. Now I'm already logged in and here we go. And once you are logged in, you're going to see something like this, right? And let me blow that up, make sure everybody can see it. So there are 3 items on there for the moment, right? The first thing is going to be this Apache Cassandra sample test. These questions, by the way, are the same questions we're going to go through today. So if you do want to go through this separate from the GitHub repository or what we're doing today, you can do this at your own pace. Again, this isn't, these are going to be the practice questions that we're doing. So this doesn't count towards any exam or anything like that. But if you notice here, I have both my Developer Associate Cert and my Administrator Associate Cert. These are the exams. One of the top questions we get is how long am I going to have, that kind of thing. Now that's going to be covered in the exam and rules section, but you're going to have a total of 90 minutes for the whole of the exam. You can take as much time as you need for every individual question, but in total you're going to have 90 minutes, right? So make sure that you feel good. I think most people come in at about an hour, a little bit maybe over, something like that. So you should have some buffer room there. But yeah, just know that you'll have a total of 90 minutes. I also want to point out, notice over here, these icons, right? So if we go back to the certification, you'll see this: review the exam rules and check your computer for compatibility and install a Google Chrome extension. What is this about? So if you remember, I said originally, not only is your exam going to be proctored, but it will check your system to ensure that you don't have like a second monitor. Really, it's kind of anti-cheating stuff. So when you click on that link, what it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, I want to install an extension. Once you install that extension, then it's going to check things. Do you have, 2 monitors or not, right? And it won't let you move forward until you resolve all the things that it's saying that you need to do. Once you have done that, though, and you come to do your test, this little button here will light up. That means, okay, my check is passed, my computer's good, I'm ready to move on. Now, the second part is you see this little price tag for $145. This is where the voucher comes into play. Normally, these tests, each exam try would cost $145. But again, once you go through the materials and you get your voucher, you'll get 2 tries. To put the voucher in, you click on the Make Payment button, you say Make Payment, and you'll have, do you have a coupon code? That's where your voucher will go, right? So don't worry. If you click on this, you're not just going to be charged $145, right? You got to put in the coupon code. Once you do that, this will go away and it's going to look like a button like you see up here. Okay, let me see. How are we doing on questions, David?
I think we're up to date.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. And again, like I said, it's very important that you take a look at the exam rules and process. This link is right here. If you go to review the exam rules, it's also in /dev/certifications. It's really important that you take a look at what this says. I'm not going to go over all of these right now or anything like that. They're also in the GitHub repo. You definitely want to know, you definitely want to have these all taken care of and ready to go up front. And again, I experienced this personally. Make sure you go to the bathroom before you take your exam, because you cannot get up from your desk. You cannot get up from where you're taking the exam, so you need to finish it once you start it. The question will come up, what happens if you have a storm or if you have a network outage or something? There are processes in place that if the connection is severed, it will let you resume. It does talk about that in the exam rules, so definitely take a look. Okay. All righty. All right, so with that, if we're good on questions, then let's go and move into the actual practice questions. Okay, looks like we're good, unless David tells me otherwise.
Yep, we're good.
All right, wonderful. All right, here's how this is going to work. First thing I'm going to do is now this is where you want to go back to Menti, okay? So we're going to go back to Menti for this part, and even though it looks, so Menti is a system that we use in a lot of our workshops to have fun quizzes and everything. It looks like this is a competition with your peers, but in this case, it's not, right? So you don't have to worry about time. Now, in each question, oh, my bad, let me go back once. In each question, we are going to give you 2 minutes today. Only reason why is we have a lot of questions to get through for the practice questions, and we need to ensure we get through them all. Again, in the real exam, you will not be timed per question. You'll just have that total time of 90 minutes, right? So what is going to happen is I'm going to throw up a question in Menti, and then up here on our screen, here, I'm going to give you the question here. So we're going to have the question on the main screen, and then look where your Menti is for the actual quiz questions. Let's go ahead and do this first one. So you should see it pop here real soon. You'll get a countdown. There it goes. Okay, so you should see a countdown for question number 1. So what you want to do here is consider the CQL statements that you see, the create table statement and these insert statements, and then figure out how many roles will the roller coasters table have after executing all of the CQL statements. Oh, by the way, don't give the answer in the chats, please. Use the Menti. yeah, that's, we don't want to give it away. Praveen, if you can't join the Menti, maybe try to just refresh or try a different browser. We'll go ahead and drop the number again for you. I just realized, David, we didn't update the Menti.
Oh, it's not on all the slides.
Yeah, I didn't update the slides, so ignore that number you see here on the right-hand side, please. My bad. I'll get you the correct Menti code here. Yeah, my bad on that. There we go. Here's the Menti code for you. Oh, yeah, David beat me to it. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the correct Menti code. Ignore the one that you see there. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the answers. And the correct answer here was C. Now, the way that this format works, what we're going to do today is I'm going to present you a question. You'll have a couple minutes. And then we're not just going to leave you there. We're going to look at the answers. We're going to look at the correct answer. And David is going to give you a breakdown of the why. So let's go ahead and do that. So the correct answer here was C, 3.
And it looks like the majority got C, but several people had D. And if you're new to Cassandra, that totally makes sense. So we'll explain why. In this question, we're asked to consider the SQL statements. It starts with a table definition. When I look at a table definition in Cassandra, the first thing I'm always going to look at is the primary key. In fact, I'm going to spend a lot of time looking at primary keys. This table has a simple primary key. It's a single field called name. And now I have 4 inserts into this table, and all of them insert name, park, and rating. So the first one inserts with a name of Millennium Force. It's a roller coaster at Cedar Point, gets a rating of 8. The second one inserts a roller coaster named Formula Rossa at Ferrari World. So that's 2 rows that get created. The third one does an insert, and the insert is Steel Dragon 2000. So that's 3 rows inserted. The issue here is the fourth one. The fourth insert, the name is Millennium Force. That's the same value that was inserted in the first row. That value is the primary key value. And in a relational database, so if you come from relational world, as most of us do, what happens when you do 2 in the same primary key? You get a primary key collision, and the second insert fails. But in this case, what you get is an upsert. Cassandra will actually update the field with the primary key Millennium Force. So it's not a new row, but you actually 3 rows of the row with primary key Millennium Force will be Cedar Point 7.
All right, and
so C is the correct answer.
And I think Jack is saying that he lost the stream. Just want to make sure that we're okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I lost.
Oh, it's back. Too. Okay, it came back. It just a little hiccup there. Yep. Yeah, I see that, Fahim. Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes that happens with YouTube and stuff, and we can't do much about it. But it looks like it came back. All right. Okay, good. All right. So one thing to add to what David just said as well, for those of you especially new to Cassandra, right? Cassandra, the last ride always wins, right? Cassandra is purpose-built for performance at scale. That's whether you have a cluster that is, say, 3 nodes or one that is thousands of nodes to be able to maintain very tight millisecond response times, right, in your reads and such. So in order to do that, there are some things that it has to do. And one of those is the mechanism that David just explained, this upsert mechanism, this last right wins piece. Because if you had to lock and stuff every time you did that with a 1,000 node cluster, yeah, good luck. So that is one of the features there, Cassandra. Okay, it looks like we're back. It just lagged for a moment. Okay, great. All right, so hopefully that gives you a feel of how we're going to do this. So I'm going to move on to the next question. There, I'm going to go ahead and start it in the quiz. So you should see a countdown in Menti here in just a moment. Okay, there it goes. All right, so again, we want to consider the CQL statements that's here, the insert statements, and then what is the result of executing all of the CQL statements on the left-hand side. Now it looks like the stream is having a little bit of a trouble here. Yeah, all right, I'm working. Let me see what I can do about that stream, everybody. For some reason, we're having a little bit of anywhere, and we will get this fixed up as best we can.
And David, other than the fact that it's frozen a couple times for me, the stream has been pretty clear.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing it on the YouTube end as well. I just restarted the stream. Let's see if that hopefully fixes it up. All right. That's okay. We're still waiting for folks to answer anyway, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah, of course. Let me get that Twitch link for you. Here's the Twitch link. Yeah, I noticed it looks like it. We have a third party here, Restream, and if anything is going on with the Restream, sometimes that might happen. All right, so the answers are in. Let's see how we are. So the correct answer here was, in fact, D. Looks like most of you got that right? But there is a little bit of a spread. Let's take a look at the Y. Go for it, David.
All right, so once again, we're going to look at the table definition, and I'm going to be drawn right to the primary key. The primary key now has two fields in it, and you'll notice both fields are in the inner set of parentheses. So what that means is they make up the partition key. The partition key is made up of the two fields, artist and title. What follows then are four inserts, each one artist, title, and length in seconds. First one's Beatles and Yesterday, so that goes into a partition. Then the Beatles and Let It Be is another partition. It's another unique combination of artist and title. Then ABBA and Fernando, yet another unique combination of artist and title. And finally, Frank Sinatra and Yesterday. And you may be wondering, yesterday, Frank Sinatra, yes, Frank Sinatra did cover Yesterday. But because each one of those inserts is a unique artist title pair, each one is its own partition. So the result of executing all the CQL statements is a table with four partitions.
All right, thank you, David. Yeah, for those of you, and I did see your comment there. You come in YouTube. If Twitch is a little bit of ahead or something like that, the best thing you can really do is just focus on one stream, and then use your Menti on your phone. The good thing here is that at least the questions aren't, you don't have to answer for speed or anything like that. So hopefully it's not going to cause problems there. Okay, number three. So again, we want to consider the CQL statement you see there on the left-hand side. And then which of the following is a valid query for the cars table? Again, we're question 3. All right, looks like our answers are all in. Let's see what happened here. The correct answer was, in fact, C. Now, before David explains it, there was a question that came up that I think is really relevant to what we're doing right now, right? Kapil in Discord asked, what's the difference between a row and a partition? Are rows called are rows called partitions in Cassandra. And then Izzy James, actually, he beat me to it, or he or she beat me to it. I was answering, and then it came up with a really good, succinct answer to this, right? Is that you will have multiple rows in a partition. A row is a unique record. Partition is a set of records grouped together physically. So something we should explain real quick, right? In Cassandra, just similar to how you would in a relational database, right? You have rows and columns, and you have a logical table structure. So within a table, you will have rows just like you would be used to in a relational database, or even an Excel spreadsheet or something. The difference is how the data is physically stored on disk. So in Cassandra, we store our data in what are called partitions, what Izzy was talking about. And again, this has everything to do with its distributed nature and being able to maintain performance at scale. So what happens is when you create a table, you actually define a partition key. You're going to see more about this, and Dave is going to talk about this as well in some of these answers. And that partition key is literally defining the way that how your data is going to be distributed around, right? So it has everything to do with how your data is being stored on disk and how it's distributed around your database. But yeah, Izzy said it dead on, right? That a row is just a unique record or a unique row of data, and then partitions, right, are going to have one or n rows, right, depending on what your partition key. That's just how data is physically stored. Cassandra, by the way, is going to do that part for you. You define your partition key. Cassandra is going to handle the partitioning part. You don't have to manually do that or be like, oh my God, well, this partition goes here and here. It'll handle that part for you. Okay, so David, I'll be quiet now and let you give the answer to number 3.
Yeah, and what David said is super important, because the other thing about Cassandra is data is distributed, and no particular node in a Cassandra cluster has all the data. So these partitions are on some nodes in the cluster, and knowing how the data is physically stored is going to drive the way we write queries and so on in Cassandra. Something that for years programming in relational databases, I never thought about how my data was physically stored or where it was physically stored. So let's look at this example. In the cars table, once again, I'm going to zoom in on the primary key. The primary key now is more complex. It has 4 fields, and you'll notice the inner parentheses there are make and model. So make and model are the partition key that David referenced, and then year and color. Year and color are what we call clustering columns. What that tells me is that the partitions for this table could, in theory, have multiple rows per partition because of the clustering columns. So let's take a look at the selects. The question is, what is a valid query for this cars table? Well, the first one, select from cars where make is Ford, is invalid right away, because in Cassandra, the query pattern we're gonna want is either partition per query, so queries within a single physical partition, or a small number of partitions per query. So a select like the one you see would require doing a query across every node in a cluster, and in a massive cluster that could be hugely expensive. We just don't allow it. The second one is also invalid because, well, it calls out year, which is part of the partition key. It doesn't call out make, which is the rest of the partition key. So right away we can exclude A and B. Now, if you look at the last 2 queries, C and D, they both specify the entire partition key, make and model. That's Ford and Mustang. So the difference is one calls out the year and one calls out the color. And the rule here is that if you constrain the first clustering column, which is year, if you constrain any clustering column, you have to constrain the first one before you constrain the second one. What we mean is C is a valid query because we've set a value or constrained the year column. D is not valid because we've set a value for the color column, but not for the year column. And the reason is performance at scale. If we allowed the query D, that would mean we would go into a partition and then we would have to jump around in the partition to retrieve the rows. The query C is also limited to a partition, but the rows are going to be contiguous within the on-disk storage, which is going to scale and provide awesome performance at scale. Even that little difference is a big deal and one of the driving philosophies behind Cassandra, performance at scale. So the correct answer is C.
Yeah, and by the way, I should also point out, right, that especially for those of you who are new to Cassandra, now, once we're done with today, and if you decide you want to go for the certification, you're going to go through those Academy courses. You're going to get learned up real quick, right, on a lot of the stuff we're talking about here. We also have, and I can drop some links, or maybe since I know Jack is lurking back there dropping links, we also have a whole set of beginner Cassandra workshops that are all self-service. We have an Intro to Cassandra one. We have some of the ones like I dropped earlier with the Node, and the Node one and such. We have workshops that you can use to create apps on Cassandra and all that kind of thing. So if you're looking to get that kind of fundamental knowledge of how it works, now keep asking your questions, by the way. I want to make sure I'm not dissuading you from that. But if you are looking for that kind of stuff, we have materials for you, no doubt. Yeet Maestro in Discord says, I have a horrible joke, Cassandra more like Crassandra. That's funny. All right, moving on. All right, so the next part is this leaderboard. So I want to be clear about the leaderboard. We're not competing against each other. We put the leaderboard here for this reason, right? In the way we're doing things in Menti today with the practice questions, each question is worth 1,000 points, right? Now, on the real exam, you need 70% to pass. So the way we've done it here is you've got 20 questions, 14 is 70. This is just a way to gauge where you're at. So don't pay attention to where you are in the leaderboard or anything so much. Just look at your phone and see the tally of your points. That's the idea. So once we're done, if you have at least 14 and you got 14,000 points, then you're at least at the passing kind of grade. It's just more of a gut check. That's why we have that. All right, moving on to question 4. We should see our countdown going here. Or there it goes. Okay, so consider the CQL statements that you see here between these two tables. And somebody asked a batch question earlier. We'll talk about batches here about this. So I did see your question, and we'll get to it in the explanation. So then what is a valid statement about this batch? Oh, okay, David, you already answered the one from Izzy. I just saw it now.
Yep.
Okay. Sajith in YouTube, I'll answer that about your question about AWS Azure here in a moment once everyone's done. All right, so everyone's done. The timing of that was pretty good. All right, so real quick, just to answer, Sajith asked, is Cassandra available for AWS and Azure? Yeah, Cassandra is available anywhere. It is completely vendor agnostic. You can install on GCP, Azure, AWS, any cloud provider, any combination of cloud provider, on-prem, whatever, right? So the answer is yes. Okay, so for the answer for the question here, number 4, the correct answer was in fact C. It looks like most of you got that right. Let's take a look. Now this one can be a little bit tricky. But once batches, by the way, I want to be very clear about something. Batches in Cassandra are not for batching up like lots of data like you might in an Oracle database or a relational database, right? They are specifically for cases where you want to synchronize multiple denormalized tables, right? So they're a different mechanism. So once you start to understand like partitioning and stuff, like where that comes into play, this will make a lot more sense. But I'll be quiet so David can actually give the answer.
Yeah, and in the YouTube chat, I made the comment to Sajith that Cassandra's not just different syntax, it's a completely different way of looking at data. And this question's a good example of that, because David said something that you'll just never hear in the relational world, and that is denormalized tables. If you look at the two tables here, it says consider the CQL statement. We have the employees and employees by department table. If you look at them quickly, they have the same data. They have an ID field, a name field, and a department field. The difference is they have different primary keys. The employees table, the primary key is simply the ID field, a single column primary key. In the employees by department table, department is the first part of the primary key, that is the partition key. So those records are going to be grouped by department, and then within a department, the clustering column on which they're sorted is ID. And this is very common in Cassandra, that two different queries, find employee by ID and find employee by department, are going to require two different tables. You don't see that in relational world. So as David said, the purpose of the batch here is to make sure that these two denormalized tables that have the same data in them are kept up to date with one another. So we create a batch, we say insert in the employees table, and we insert Joe with his ID and department, and we insert the same data, the same employee really, into the employees by department table. So what's a valid statement about this batch? It's a single partition batch that can be applied. Well, A is false and so is B, because this is two different tables, they're two different partitions. The next question is, since it's a multi-column, a multi-partition batch, can this be applied or not? Well, the answer is a batch can be applied if all of the operations in the batch can be applied. And there's nothing in these two inserts that would cause them not to be applied. You may say, Dave, well, what could cause them not to be applied? Well, not defining the primary key would be one thing, but a duplicate primary key would not prevent this. That's a double negative. A duplicate primary key, this could still be applied because it would be an upsert, because this is Cassandra, not a relational database. So we can confidently say that this is a multi-partition batch, two different tables, and it can be applied.
And I do see a question here that at least one other person kind of seconded, so I'll answer it here real fast. What happens if it fails after the first statement? Does it roll back? So first thing, there are no rollbacks in Cassandra. Right. Now, the second part of that is, when using batches, the default is used what's called a log batch. I would stick with that default. Unless you have a really, really good reason and you understand what an unlog batch is, stick with a log batch. What that does for you then is a batch is essentially just a stronger retry mechanism, right? And so if you did have a case where you're using the default of a log batch, and for some reason one of those options, one of the operations failed, it will keep retrying and retrying and trying across the nodes until that happens, right? So it's a guarantee that, hey, I'm either going to apply all of the statements in my batch or not, right? So if any one of the statements succeeds, then it will guarantee that it's going to ensure that the rest of them do, in fact, play as well. So that's part of where a batch comes into play. Yeah, no criming baseball, no rollback in Cassandra, exactly. All right, moving on to question number 5. So consider the table definition with a primary key omitted here. What primary key does this table have? Make sure you take a look at the "it is known that" section. All right, looks like the answers are in. Let's see how everybody did. So the correct answer in this case was in fact B. It looks like the vast majority of you got that right. Good job. Let's take a look at why.
All right, so once again, we're going to look at the table definition, but here it says the primary key is omitted. So these statements that David pointed out, it is known that restaurant reviews are uniquely identified by a combination of name, city, and reviewer. What that tells me is that the primary key, the entire primary key, will have all three of those fields in it. Because here, just like Relational World, a row is uniquely identified by its primary key. So I know all three fields are in it, but if I look at the answers, they all have all three fields. So at least I know they're all possible. The next one is important. It says rows are retrieved from the table using a combination of name and city. So in order to retrieve rows by name and city, a couple of things could be going on. You could have either name or city as the partition key. But if name is the partition key, then city has to be the first clustering column, or you wouldn't be able to do a query based on just name and city. So A, I'm going to exclude on that basis A, because A would allow a query with name and reviewer, but not name and city. Because of the order of the clustering columns. Remember we said if you constrain any clustering columns, you have to constrain the first one. And if then the second, then the third in order. So A is ruled out. C is ruled out because under C you could retrieve by the partition key, which is name and reviewer. So we can't do, but the requirement is name and city, so that doesn't work. And reviewer, name, and city, the last one, once again, if all three are the primary key and the partition key, you need to retrieve by all three. You couldn't retrieve by just name and city. So B in this case is the only one of these answers that fits the requirements. Important note, you could come up with another possibility, another possible primary key. If name were the partition key and city were the first clustering column, that would work. Or if city were the partition key and name were the first clustering column, that would work too. But of the choices given, B is the only possible answer.
Alrighty, thank you, David. Moving on to question number 6. Let me go ahead and start that quiz. There we go, we should see it. All right, so if you consider the table definition and the CQL query here, which materialized view definition can be used to support the query? Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the correct answer here. Was in fact D. Now, even though most of you got that right, there was definitely a spread. Now, funny enough, I lost David. So I will answer this one, and hopefully David comes back soon. I don't know if something happened to his network connection. So this one is one of those questions that if you didn't know it, now you're going to know, right? And you'll never get this one wrong ever again. So when you are working with materialized view, you cannot have null values, right? You can't have null values in a case like your primary key. So if you knew that, then looking at what the primary key here is and what you expect to do, there's only one answer that can possibly be it, because again, you can't have those null values. And if you notice in this case where wins is not null and name is not null, right? Both of those, in fact, would need to be not null, right? They cannot have those no values. Now, looking at the keys themselves, right? So that immediately, well, we have two options that have both name and wins is not null. But if you look at the query that we're trying to execute here, right? Where you look at our original table, our primary key is on create a table in Cassandra. You want to create your primary key to answer a specific query. But what happens if I have the same exact data? I just have a different query access pattern. I have a different key that I want to look by. One way to potentially achieve that is, again, with a materialized view. So what's key here, though, is that I'm looking to key off of wins, right? So notice the ordering here. The ordering would matter. This one here, if name was my partition key, that's not going to get me what I'm looking for here. So in this case, that is why the one answer D is, in fact, correct. All right, I don't think we've gotten David back, so I'm just going to go and move on. Before we do that, let's take a look at our leaderboard just again to give you a feel where you are. All right, so at this point, we've gotten through 6 questions. If you've gotten them all right, you have 6,000 points. Again, this is just a gut check. And we'll move on to question 7. And we'll go ahead and start that up. So if you consider the table definition in the CQL query we see here, which secondary index can be used to support the query? There we go. Hopefully we are caught up and you can see the stream again. All right. Man, all right. Okay, looks like the answers are in. Sorry about the little hiccup there in the stream. Should have that fixed back up now. All right, so this one may have been a little tricky. So this is, again, one of those questions that once, if you got it wrong, you'll never get it wrong again. So let's go ahead and take a look at the why. So something to know about a secondary index, right, is if you look at all these other examples here, you'll see that the correct answer is by cuisine. Now, if you look at our table, our original table, and what we're trying to do, our partition key here is city, and then we're clustering by name, right? Now, in the query that we're trying to support here, notice that in our where clause, we're using city for, our partition key. That's great. But cuisine is sushi. Well, cuisine is not in our primary key. So in Cassandra, I just can't query against that, right? I have to set something else up. I either have to add as a clustering column, or in this case, add a secondary index. Now, secondary indexes are not used for partition keys. So right away, if you know that, then when you take a look at the other answers here, Notice city, city, city. I know right off the bat that none of those are correct because of the plain fact that they include the partition key. The only thing, when I create a secondary index, I'm creating an index only on the column that I'm looking to query against, and in this case, it's cuisine. So once I know that, then the answer is in fact cuisine, and that's why we have A there. All right, did I hear Dave come back? There's Dave.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, let me get you. It looks like you're on your phone. So there you go. That's a new way to do it. All right, Dave. Well, we're gonna. This is the fourth wall coming down right here. You might be able to see his green screen, but we're just gonna deal with it. It sounds like you had internet issues over there.
And strangely enough, I can't connect my computer to my phone hotspot.
Oh wow! All right. All right, so hopefully you can see Dave. So I moved on, by the way. We're going to go ahead and get into question 8. And by the way, you know, I do apologize that it seems like we're having little hiccups in our stream today. If for some reason, you know, if that's disrupted some of the questions, all of the stuff is online and self-service and everything. So there should be no loss from that standpoint. All right, so on to question 8. Let me go ahead and get that moving in Menti. All right, so which statement describes the where clause in a query? That's right. That was... All right, looks like our answers are in, David. And the correct answer in this case is, in fact, A. Let's take a look at why. This is actually another one of those, like the secondary index one, that if you get it wrong this time, you'll never get it wrong again.
Right. And the answer is A. The where clause must reference all the fields of the partition key. It goes back again to what David said early on, that Cassandra is designed for performance at scale. So when you do a query, you have to include the partition key so we know which partition or small number of partitions the data will be found in. That way, if you have 1,000 node cluster, for example, and that's not an unrealistic number, Cassandra doesn't have to go and ask every node for the result. It knows which possible nodes the data could be on and goes right to those nodes. So the partition key is the requirement.
Yeah, John Paul, yes, clustering key is optional. So the partition key is the only required portion of your primary key. Clustering keys are used for either ordering or uniqueness, and they are in fact optional. You do not need to have one.
Right.
All right, let's move on to question 9. And there we go. All right, so if you consider the CQL statements here on the left, which insert statement can be used to insert a row in the people table?
And David, I'm turning my video off while I try to bring up my other computer.
Okay. All right, so the answers are in. Correct answer here is A. Looks like we have a little bit of a spread. Let's take a look at, ooh, there we go. There we go. There we go. That's what I meant to do. All right, so this is one of those, oh, if you want, I can answer it while you're getting that back, Dave.
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay, go for it.
In this question, it's one of those that it's a syntax question. This one's a memorization question. You kind of either remember this or don't. But the first thing to note here is that we are creating a user-defined type called name and a table called people that uses that user-defined type. So we have some of these ways like user-defined types and collections of organizing more complex data within our table structures. Notice that both the name type and the people table are created in a key space. Which insert? Well, this really comes down to a question of, do you know the syntax for inserting to an embedded user-defined type? And the answer here is simple. The syntax is JSON. So A is the correct answer.
All righty. And I do see, let's see, I do see a question here. Does the partition key must be primary key? How many partition keys allowed in one CQL statement? You must have at least one partition key in your primary key. That is the required thing. So if you had nothing but a single partition key, then you're good, right? How many partition keys is allowed in a CQL statement? I mean, n number. I mean, there are practical limitations. You know, if you had like 1,000 partition keys, it might be a little weird. It might be a bit much. But no, you could have, Dave, unless you tell me otherwise, I mean, I think there's still a practical limitation. I've seen folks use up to like a dozen, but I think that's more of an anomaly, not the normal case.
Right, and to be clear, what you're talking about is the number of columns that can be in a partition key.
Yes.
That's the number of partition keys in a statement.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so looking where we're at so far, we've had 9 questions. So again, just gut check. That's a total for 9,000 points so far. And moving on to question 10. All right, so if we look at the CQL statements here, the create table and our insert, update, and select, then what is the result of executing these CQL statements? I want to, without giving it away, I want to say pay particular attention to that create table statement and the fields that are there and their types. Interesting. I will start the Menti thing again. Even though mine moved forward, for some reason it sounds like some of you are stuck in Menti. So let's see. You should see a countdown. Hopefully you got that question again. Let me know if it doesn't move forward. Great. Thank you, Sanjay. Thanks for everyone for reporting that. I appreciate it.
Username, voiceover off.
Excellent. Thank you for the reporting. Awesome. Real quick, the proper code for Menti, by the way, is, there you go, Lakesh, is 628024.2. Bring that back out. There you go. All right, and answers are in. Let's take a look at the correct answer here. All right, this one got spread around a little bit, and that's okay. And that's why we're here. So let's take a look at the proper answer. There you go, David.
All right, and David gave you a great hint on this one. It's actually a good hint for anything on the test. You've got to read these very carefully.
Yes.
So if we look at this table definition, we have username, email, text, nickname, or username, email, description, nickname, and the primary key is username, email. The partition key is username. All right, so that puts it all together. I have two inserts, an update, and a select. Right away, I look at the two inserts, and they both insert the same username, DC1234, with different email address, david@datastacks.com and david@gmail.com. different descriptions, work and personal, and different, or the same nickname, Dave and Dave. Then I do an update. Well, first off, that results in 2 rows. There are 2 rows because the rows uniquely identified by username and email, same username, different email, 2 rows in the same partition. Next, I have an update, and here's where it gets interesting. We say update emails by user, set nickname to Davey and description to school, where the username is DC1234 and the email is david@gmail.com. So david@gmail.com, that was the second insert, and we want to set the nickname to Davey and the description to school. So right away, I'm going to rule out C and D because those have only 1 row. We said there are 2 rows in this partition, and we get down to A and B. The only difference between A and B is in A, the nickname is Dave for the first email and Davey for the second. And in B, the nickname is Davey for both. The correct answer is B. And the reason is that the nickname field is static. What it means for a field or a column to be static is that that column has the same value for all rows in a partition. So even though we updated it for a specific row, because it was a static field, it updated for the entire partition. If you were to use the SS table dump tool and look at the underlying tables in which this is stored, you would see that there's only 1 entry in the entire partition for the nickname. So it applies to every row in the partition.
Yeah, and that was that hint. Matter of fact, Anshul in YouTube had it right. He said one important thing to note here is that nickname is static. And that was that little hint I was giving you, right? As David pointed out, you really want to pay attention to the data model and the schema definition and such, so you don't miss something like that, because that one would be particularly important. All right, moving on to 11. I just threw up the answer there for a second. All right, so consider the 2 data centers in the diagram. You're going to see now that we're going to move to a slightly different format from what you've seen before, right? So again, we're giving you a sampling of the kind of questions you'll get. So what is a valid statement about a read request made at consistency level of local quorum to coordinator node Z in the Paris data center? Oh, hey, Dave, I'm getting an echo from your end there.
Do you have it now?
Yes.
Yep. How about now?
Yes. Not as bad echoey as repeating like it did a moment ago, but yes.
Are you hearing me okay? No.
Yeah, I hear you. There's still a little echo there, though. All right, by the way, we do have our answers. Let's see what we look at. All right, so the correct answer is B. It looks like most of you got that correct. Let's take a look at why. Now, Dave, are you in a position where you can answer this one, or?
No, my audio is not set up.
Okay, all right, let me go ahead and go on while you are getting that working. Okay, so if we take a look, here's the key thing that you need to know about what's happening here with consistency level in multiple data centers. Notice that the request is made at a consistency level of local quorum. Local quorum, right? So what does that mean? So local quorum says that I am going to achieve quorum at the local data center, wherever the operation is being sent. Now I've got two data centers here. Now a local quorum says, well, I'm going to achieve quorum just at, in this case, we're talking to the Paris DC. So I'm just going to achieve quorum at the one data center, not across my data centers, right? Matter of fact, if I was not using the local variant and just using quorum as my consistency level, then I would actually have to achieve quorum across my data centers, which would be something a little bit different. So the key thing to understand here is that we are using local quorum and against the Paris DC. So that's where the correct answer here is B. The request will be handled in data center Paris DC and will succeed. All right, moving on. So this one, number 12 here, question 12, will give you kind of an example of yet another type of question. So by the way, in the actual exam, just be advised that if you see a question like this, there might be a scroll bar, right? Depending on your browser, your font size, all sorts of things. So just be aware of that. And so you want to consider the CQL traces that you see and what elapsed time is the data persisted so that we'll survive an unexpected node shutdown.
Okay, how does my audio sound now?
Much better. Woo! As long as I don't talk too loud.
All right, I think I'm back.
Great. You want me to turn on your video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's strange.
There you go.
Hey, I'm back.
Okay, looks like our answers are in. And the correct answer is C. All right, I will mute myself because there's work going on back here that I think everyone can hear. So David, go for it.
Okay, I've been having so much computer trouble today, I thought it was me. All right, so, the correct answer here is C. The question is, at what elapsed time is the data persisted so it will survive an unexpected node shutdown? So if you look through, and you do have to scroll, as David said on the test, watch out, there are questions of this form, you may have to scroll as well. But if you look at the operations, we are parsing, we are preparing the statement, determining the replicas, adding to the commit log, adding names to the mem table. If we look at those, preparing the statement, determining the replicas, that's where we're going to replicate, appending to the commit log. The commit log is on disk storage, and the purpose of the commit log is to store data persistently so it survives the shutdown. The next thing is the mem table. Well, the mem table is transient memory. It's in RAM, and a shutdown will lose the mem table. So it's at the time that the commit log is appended to, and that's 2193 milliseconds, and that's the answer. Someone noted that the default unit is probably microseconds, and you may be right there, Nicholas, because 2193 milliseconds would be super
Yeah,
low.
I noticed that as well. We should probably double check that and make sure we update the slide there.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. One thing I do want to note, though, I'm going to skip that for a later slide.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that. But Nicholas, I think you're right there.
Yeah, I think so. And by the way, the commit log is actually one of the really cool features. Again, this is something Cassandra just does for you. It's a robustness feature that's already baked into how Cassandra works. It's really there in case, a node goes down. It's going to happen, right? And it has a mechanism there that protects your data and protects things in the not milliseconds there. That should be micro, but is very fast. And the second that data is persisted to disk, then if that node goes down, then when the node comes back up, it'll just replay those, and it just a nice robustness mechanism there. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at question 13. How is replication factor configured in Cassandra? All right, and answers are in. This is another one of those that you'll never get this wrong after you get it wrong once, because then you'll know. And, it should be noted that for those of you brand new to Cassandra, you probably would never have known this, but the second you start working with Cassandra and you create your first key space, boom, this one's in. This one's kind of in your head.
Right, and the reason for that is you are required to set replication factor when you configure a key space. So the first exercise in the first Cassandra lab, create a simple database and a simple table. When you create the key space, you must specify both replication factor and replication strategy, like data center aware strategy, simple strategy, and so on. So that's just a memorization question, and you're unlikely to ever get this one wrong again, as David said.
Yeah. And again, once you go through the materials in Academy, any of those learning paths, all the stuff that we're doing here, you're going to learn all this, right? So if you're getting some of these wrong, no worries. We've got the resources for you for that very reason. Okay, so then moving over to question 14. Now, even though a couple of these are going to say administrator exams on them, don't go anywhere, right? Because we still have some of the data modeling ones to do. This stuff is still relevant. But for those of you who are really going to focus on just the developer piece, you wouldn't really expect a question like this, right? Now, one thing to point out, though, is notice that in the question, what are the two options for internode encryption? In Cassandra, choose 2. If you see this on the actual exam, if you see something that says choose 2, it means you must choose 2. However, in Menti, the way Menti works, we can't force it to choose 2. You got to choose either one. So there are actually 2 correct answers here. If you get either one, then you'll get it correct here. Just know in the real exam, you'll have to choose both. Yeah, that's right. For who is it? Anshul? Oh, yeah, Anshul. In Menti, you can only choose one. That's why I was mentioning that in a real exam. If you saw something that said choose 2, then you would actually choose 2. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at the answers here for 14. Now, the correct answers were both C and E. So in the exam, you would have needed to have chosen both C and E. But again, Menti only allows us to do 1. Let's take a look at the why.
All right, so in this one, internode encryption, we're talking about encryption between nodes. So that rules out client altogether, because not from the client to the node, but between the nodes. And the correct answers are C and E, because the available options are all. So all intranode communications can be encrypted. None, so turn it off completely. Or the other 2 are DC, meaning when we cross DC boundaries, we encrypt, or rack boundaries. And by the way, rack is a subset of a DC. A DC or data center is a logical grouping of Cassandra nodes, typically in a data center or in a region or zone. And then a rack is a subset of a data center that may be meaningful to you depending on your deployment topology. But the correct answers here are C and E.
Okay, all right, moving on to 15. We're almost there, everybody. So which configuration file is used to set garbage collection properties for Cassandra? Now, Cassandra is built on Java, so something to keep in mind. All right, let's see. I'll look at our answers. The correct answer in this case was B, which is the JVM options. I think that was kind of self-explanatory though, but you know, like if you're used to Java, right? When it comes to garbage collection, yeah, go for it.
To be fair, GC options sounds reasonable enough.
It does. I didn't mean it like that. That's
is where the majority of our Cassandra configuration goes. So I think those might be reasonable answers. But JVM options is specifically designed so you can localize all the possible JVM options in that file. That includes heap sizing, generation sizing, garbage collection selection. All of that good stuff goes into JVM options. And that, again, this one is a memorization question. Some of these you really had to look at the CQL, look at the table definitions. Others you just kind of knew them. So we have a mixture of those questions.
Exactly. All right. Moving on to question 16. This is actually one of my favorite questions. I know that sounds funny, but I think it really illustrates something about Cassandra. We've been talking about last write wins, something to keep in mind. So if you consider the table definition here and how a single row is stored in one mem table and two SS tables on a Cassandra node, then what are the current values for this row? Oh. Okay, and the answer here, the correct answer is in fact B. Looks like the vast majority of you got that correct. Let's take a look at why.
Right, and this comes down to that latest write rules. One other note, someone asked earlier, is this exam harder or easier than the previous exam? And it was on the Discord channel, and I answered and said, it's less tricky, the difficulty should be the same. Because the previous, what we did for this exam is we got together with a third-party company that is an expert at writing test questions. They're not technical people. The exam's still written by technical people, but we asked them, hey, is there anything in these questions that makes things unnecessarily hard or tricky or complicated? And this would have been an example of that. Because we're looking at timestamps here, these timestamps have been modified, so you only have to look at the first 3 digits to see that they're different. 139, 120, 118. So if you look at this now, we have the test table, and we're looking at the current values for the row. The mem table has the most recent timestamps. The ID is 11. See the ID is 11 for all 3 mem table and 2 SS tables. So we're talking about the same row. The score from the mem table is 75. That's the latest timestamp, 139 ... So what I know is that the score for this row is 75. The ID is 11. What's the test? Well, the mem table doesn't have a test value, so I need to look at one or more SS tables. Both SS tables have a test value, and math from the top SS table is a timestamp of 120 ... English has a timestamp of 118 ... 118 is earlier, later wins. So 120 wins. The result is 11 math and 75, and that's B. But I will point out, anytime you have to read a timestamp, you will be able to tell in the first few digits the order. You won't have to read to the 9th digit to figure out which one's different.
So something I want to call out here, Samia in YouTube asked a really, really good question, right? And I think this is, again, key to understanding how things are happening in Cassandra. And Samia makes the comment, mem table does not mean it is committed yet. It would obviously be in the commit log, but a read could give you old values, question mark. So here's something to keep in mind. When data is in the mem table, right, it may not be flushed to an SS table yet, but it's still as every bit as valid as data that would be in the SS table. The only difference is it just hasn't been flushed onto disk. So when a read is performed as part of the read path, if there's anything in the mem table, it's gonna look to the mem table and to the SS tables, right? Now, generally speaking, the mem table is gonna have the latest data. Why? Because that's where the data is first going before it gets flushed to disk, right? So the chance that you have data in the mem table that is somehow older timestamp wise than the same like row in an SS table, that seems a little strange to me. But the comparison is made across your mem table and your SS tables, right? So it's not just an either or kind of thing. If that's what you were getting at, I'm not entirely sure if that's what you meant by that. Okay, so moving on to question 17. There we go. All right, so question 17, let's go ahead and start. By the way, I think we're going to go maybe just about 10 minutes over, right? So if you would stick with us. All right, so what is a valid statement about a coordinator node handling a query at consistency level 3? By the way, for those of you familiar with Cassandra, and you're like, why would you use a consistency level 3? Don't pay attention to that. Look at what the question is asking you and what the potential answers here are. Okay, the answers are in. Let's see what we ended up with here. The correct answer in this case was D. We see a lot of people answered B. Let's take a look at the answer, the correct answer.
Right, and once again, this comes down to that design goal philosophy of Cassandra, and that is performance at scale. So we're talking about a consistency level of 3, and there are 3 choices for a query. One, the coordinator node sends a direct request to all replicas. The coordinator node doesn't need to query all replicas. A consistency level of 3 says we're going to get a response from 3 replicas, and once we do, we'll consider that sufficient and send a reply back to the requester. But there's a little more to it than that. The second, B, the coordinator node sends a direct read request to 3 replicas. That answer is not correct, but I can see why you might have chosen that. Because consistency level of 3, we need to hear from 3 replicas. But the idea of this performance at scale is, let's say you're requesting a lot of data. You're requesting an entire partition that's got, tons and tons of rows in it. If you request that from 3 nodes, you have to wait till all 3 replica nodes send back the data. The coordinator node has to wait for all 3 before it can respond to the consumer. What the coordinator really does is D. It sends a direct read request. In other words, it asks for the entire data from one replica and then asks for a digest, sort of like a checksum of the data from the remaining number required to meet that consistency level. And since the level is 3, the remainder is 2. So it gets the data from one node and gets digest from the others, and then compares a digest of the data it's received to the 2 replicas. In the best case, they match, and the coordinator has the data, has agreement from all 3 nodes, returns the data. It's possible that they don't match, in which case latest write rules, and along with those checksums or digests, the coordinator knows the time of the write, and it accepts the digest. It says, I got a digest with a more recent write from node A. It now makes a further request to node A to get the real data, the data it considers to be up to date, and then it sends that back to the consumer. So in order to be high performance at scale, it's not going to request the data from all the nodes, and in the best case, it'll get agreement and send the data it gets back. That'll also trigger a background repair request, because now the coordinator knows that, hey, this particular node has data that's older than this other node. So D's the correct answer here.
Yeah, and just a point of clarification is a conversation I'm having with Asomya in YouTube, right? So Asomya had originally asked, is there also a background repair during this request? And I had responded, yes. Yes, if needed, repairs will happen either at the read or part of anti-entropy repair in the background. And then Asomya responded with, so option C is also partly valid. Here's the difference, right? So option C, that we're talking about at the actual read, right? So the coordinator node sends a background read repair request to 3 replicas. It doesn't start that way. It does this comparison we're talking about with the digest that Dave was just talking about. If it finds during that operation that one node, let's say, has stale data when it does the digest comparison, then it very well may issue off that read repair. But that is not what happens right out of the gate. That's the difference, right? So that would be more of kind of like a lazy repair, if you will, or that's going to happen often. It's an own asynchronous thread that is not going to be as part of the read operation, if that makes sense. So it may be kicked off. It may be kicked off because it actually finds that, okay, one of the nodes is stale or something, but that's not going to get in the way of the read path. I hope that makes some sense there. Okay, great. I see it. Thank you. The 10x makes sense. Wonderful. Okay, so moving on to question 18. We're almost there, everybody. Woo! Almost there, almost at the end. All right, so what is a valid statement about a write made at consistency level local quorum against a key space with a replication factor of 3? Okay, answers are in. Let's go ahead and take a look. And the correct answer here was C. So this one, you know, Anshul over in YouTube definitely had the right of it, right? And this is one of those areas where you start to see the relationship between consistency level and replication factor. So let's hear it, Dave. Oops. Oh, wow. Give me a second. I fat fingered my thing. There you go.
No worries. We can still talk about
funny,
it.
Yeah.
I was almost ready to say ignore Anshul's comment.
Yeah.
All right. So the question here is, you know, the consistency level is local quorum and the replication factor is 3. And Anshul's comment was great because he says, Anshul says, here, considering the options, we really don't need to know the consistency level. And that's absolutely correct, because what Cassandra is going to try to do is it's going to attempt to write to all the replicas every time.
Right.
So the coordinator will send writes to 3 nodes because the replication factor is 3. However, what does consistency level mean then? What it means is as soon as a local quorum of that consistency level, and a quorum is more than half, so which really should be called majority, as soon as 2 of those local replicas respond, that's sufficient to meet the consistency requirement, and Cassandra, the coordinator node, can send back an ACK to the consumers. So we're going to try to write to all 3, but as soon as 2 respond, we're good. We'll tell the consumer, hey, your write succeeded.
Exactly. All right. So moving on to question 19. Now you'll notice this one is totally a different format. This gets into the data modeling piece, the DS220. So for those of you especially doing the developer path, the developer learning path, that certification, you're going to need to know this kind of thing. So consider the Chibako diagram that captures the physical data model for investment portfolio data. Now, if you don't know anything about Chibako diagrams, it's okay. It's okay. You will learn. I will give you a hint. K means partition key. C means clustering column. The arrow denotes the order of the clustering column. And with that, what is the primary key in clustering order of the table trades by ASD? All right, let's take a look at the answers. And the correct answer here was D. Let's take a look at why.
Okay, it looks like the majority of the folks got D, but there was some spread in the answers. So the 3 fields that make up the primary key are account, symbol, and trade ID. Also, the clustering columns are in order. That matters. So they've got to be listed in the primary key in the order account, symbol, and trade ID. That rules out number 1, or A, and that rules out B. So account symbol, trade ID, that makes C and D possibilities. How do we differentiate between C and D? Well, if you look at the Chebotka diagram, the symbol is a clustering column with the arrow rising. That means it's an ascending order. Ascending order is the default order for clustering columns. Trade ID is a clustering column in descending order. All right, so I look at C, and C is not the correct answer, but it has all 3 fields, account, symbol, trade ID, and defines the clustering column trade ID in descending order. Why isn't that the answer? The reason is, just like we said early on when we were querying by clustering columns, now when we're declaring them, if you specify or constrain the order of a clustering column, in other words, if you don't take the default, you have to start by specifying the first or leftmost column. So yes, this says trade ID is descending in C, but we'd also have to say that symbol is ascending, even though that's the default. Because the rule is, if you constrain clustering columns, you have to start with the leftmost or first column. So the only possible correct answer here is D.
All right. So, by the way, before I start the question for number 20, I know that some folks have to leave. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop a link right now to the giveaway form. So we do have a giveaway for you. Let me go ahead and do that there and do that there. I mean, we'll be wrapping up here real soon, just in a couple of minutes, but I do want to ensure everyone can get this. So this form, you can use this for one of 2 things, right? And it says it in the form, but I'll say it now, that you want to use the same email that you use to register for this event in the form. But in the form, you have 2 options. You can either choose what we already talked about, the voucher, right? So if you want to get a voucher, you can do that. But there's also another option there for you, which is a $300 Astra credit. Now, Astra, if you're using the free tier, we're not using it in this particular workshop, but the free tier is free forever. So if you're experimenting with Astra, right, then though that's going to be free. But the second you want to move on to like a production quality cluster or something like that, that's where this comes into play. So you can choose that option if you would like, and you can get yourself a $300 credit. Just follow the instructions that you see in the form. I just want to make sure that everybody got that. So, okay, let's go ahead and move on. I will say that again at the end, but I want to make sure folks got it. All right, so question 20, let's go ahead and start. This is the last one. You're right here with us. Wonderful. Consider the application workflow diagram for an investment portfolio application. Which access patterns are evaluated before an application can evaluate Q 3.2?
Yeah, nice one, John Pyle.
That's funny. Okay, looks like our results are in, and the correct answer here was A, so let's take a look at why.
All right, by the way, if you are really interested in data modeling, there's a data modeling workshop coming up tomorrow, right, David?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, on Wednesday and Thursday, it's an advanced data modeling workshop. It'll be at the same time. So that would definitely be one to check out.
I think Artem's doing that, isn't he?
Yes, Artem. Yeah, he's the person who created these. So if you're interested, you should totally take a look at the workshop tomorrow.
Yeah, Dr. Chabatko of Chabatko Diagram fame, who's one of our colleagues. So if we take a look at this, this is the application workflow diagram. And really, this is an important part of Cassandra data modeling that isn't part of traditional relational data modeling. So as we look at this, the data access patterns here, the question is, what access patterns are evaluated before we can evaluate access pattern 3.2? So if you look at the diagram, the entry point into this diagram is query 1, show investment accounts of a user. From that, you can go from query 1 to either query 2 or query 3. In this diagrammatic form, Q2 is not a prerequisite for Q3. So Q1 is the prerequisite for Q3, Q1 is the prerequisite for Q2. But Q3, as you see the list of access patterns below, Q3 is not one query, but it's several queries, Q3.1, 3.2, 3.3. Any one of those would stand in, if you will, for Q3. So what is the prerequisite, or what must be evaluated before Q3.2? The answer here is A, simply Q1, because after Q1 you can do Q3, but Q3 is sort of like an abstract query, if you want to think in object-oriented terms, and its actual queries are 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5. So that's what, this is really just a look at that diagrammatic form. Correct answer is A.
Excellent. Okay, so now the important part here is taking a look at where you are as far as the leaderboard goes. So you could have had a total of, where is, Menti is only giving me the count up to up to the one. Well, you could have a total of 20,000, right? So if you got them, oh, there we go. Okay. So if you got them all right, then you had 20,000. So for those of you who got like in the 20,000, 19,000, 18,000, you're already in a really good spot. Now to note, these are practice questions, right? And there's only 20 of them. In the real exam, you'll have 60. You're going to have, they're going to be the same kind of flavor, but they're not going to be these exact questions or anything like that. So again, the whole reason of us putting up the points here is just so you can kind of get a gut check. In the real exam, a passing grade is 70%, so you'd need at least 14,000 points in this case. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so with that, let's see. Last question. If you wouldn't mind, we always take your feedback for these. What should we improve for future workshops? Is there something else you want to see? Are there topics that you want to see? Whatever. Throw it in here. Be frank. Be honest with stuff. Because, matter of fact, we use the results that we get in here to come up with a lot of our next content. Yeah. Speed them up a little bit. It's kind of funny about that. The only way we could do that in this case is by just reducing the amount of questions. So we very well may end up doing that at some point. Our workshops, we found a good sweet spot of about 2 hours. We are, by the way, coming up with some shorter form bite-sized content. Keep a watch on our YouTube channel for that kind of material. For the Kafka plus Cassandra piece and the Spark ones there, we actually have workshops on those today. Right? So while you are all answering, if you were to go to that repo that we talked about earlier, DataStax Academy, the organization, you'll find in there a whole set of various workshops. Now, Pulsar, by the way, I'm cheating a little bit. For those of you familiar with Kafka, you're going to want to check out Pulsar. right? Pulsar in a way is like an evolution of Kafka, if you will. It does away with, it still uses Zookeeper, but it uses Zookeeper only for metadata. It doesn't use it. It doesn't run into some of the same limitations that we're running into with Kafka. We just actually created a brand new workshop on that. That's that workshop Pulsar that you see here. There is also one that we haven't run in a little while, the machine learning one, right? That one gets into some of the Spark loads. So this is something to take a look at there. Yes, for wanting more offline practice tests. So there are 2 ways that you can do that. One is, if you remember back over in Academy, when I had logged in to Metal, you'll see here, there is the Apache Cassandra sample test. These are the same questions we took just now. So that's one way you can do those offline. Also, when you go to the courses themselves in Academy, here, and both the admin and developer paths, when you click in and you're actually in one of the courses, you'll find quiz. You see these quizzes. You're going to want to get familiar with these quizzes anyway. So this you can totally do on your own and self-paced, and it will be based off of the types of questions you should expect in the real exam. Yeah, something about covering like things like compaction, SS tables, all of that is in the Academy courses. All of it is, right? So definitely take a look there. As far as serverless goes, funny enough, on the 24th and 25th at the end of this month, we're going to be doing our Battle Stacks workshop. That's one I actually am doing as well. That is all serverless. So that's going to be serverless deployment, serverless functions, serverless database, the whole thing. So if you're interested in that, that's really something to take a look at. Okay, and let's see. So a couple links here at the very end. Now, something else to note. For those of you who you want to get your hands dirty, but maybe a VM isn't a really great option for you, or if you have like a lower bandwidth machine, or lower bandwidth connection in a lower resource machine, and you don't want to have to download like a 3 gig VM and run it there is another option. If you notice katacoda.com/datastacks, there's a whole set of courses in there. One are the Cassandra Endro courses. That's essentially DS201. Right? Almost the whole of DS201 is in Katacoda. And then the data modeling course is new. That one actually gets into real world use case data modeling. Matter of fact, that is some of the material in there is exactly what's going to happen tomorrow in the advanced data modeling course. Or the workshop, I should say. So totally take a look at these. Again, these are free. These are all free. And what's cool about Katacoda, if you're not familiar with it, it will spin up instances for you in the cloud, so you don't actually have to run this stuff on your local machine. And then you can bang on it all you want up on instances up in the cloud. And then, again, as I mentioned, if you have follow-up questions, there are some of you that ask some longer form questions, and I may have pointed you to community. That's a great place to go and ask your questions. We are on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Twitch, wherever. Feel free to come and connect with us. We're more than happy to talk to you if you've got questions, follow up, anything you might need. Definitely come and hit us up. And with that, thank you. And I see, by the way, Anshul, I see, can we have a workshop on the case studies of fixing Cassandra clusters in production? That's an interesting one. Yeah, we'll put it on the list, right? We'll put it on the list. And Jasper, any swags to win? No, we didn't have swag today for this workshop because it's not a competitive quiz, but you did get that form. I will go ahead and drop it again right now. Here you go. This form, again, you can either choose to get a voucher or a $300 credit in Astra. All you have to do is create an Astra database and pass us some information. So go check that out. And with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, David. We appreciate you guys all sticking with us. Everyone's sticking with us. We had a little stream interruption, but we got through it. And we love seeing you here. So again, good luck on your exams. Let us know if you have any problems, questions, or anything. Follow up with us in Discord and the community. And with that, take care, everybody. We'll see you later.
Yep, see you later.